I was standing in the grocery store, clutching a carton of milk, when I heard a soft voice say, "Mom?" I turned around, expecting to see my daughter, but the girl in front of me wasn't her. She looked just like me. Same eyes. Same dimple in her left cheek. Even the same nervous way of twisting her fingers when she spoke. I laughed awkwardly and said, "Sweetheart, I think you've mistaken me for someone else." But her mother appeared seconds later, and froze. Her face went pale. She looked at me like I was a ghost. It should have ended there. A strange coincidence. But something about that moment haunted me. The girl. The resemblance. The way the other mother stared at me like she knew something I didn't. 2 weeks later, a single piece of paper shattered everything I thought I knew. The daughter I had raised for 12 years wasn't mine. And my real child? She had been living 5 miles away this entire time. Let me tell you how I found out, and what happened next. Before I take you deeper into this story, I want you to do one quick thing: hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stories like this deserve to be heard, and I promise, the twists coming next will leave you speechless. My name is Alana Monroe. I was 38 when everything changed, but before that, my life was ordinary. Predictable. Peaceful, even. I lived in a quiet suburb outside of Charleston with my husband, Darren, and our daughter, Olivia. She was 12, smart, independent, a little shy around strangers but full of questions at home. She loved sketching animals, hated math, and was always glued to those DIY science experiment videos on YouTube. To anyone looking in, we were a normal family. I worked part-time from home as a transcriptionist, which let me be available for school pickups, dentist appointments, and late-night talks about mean girls and growing pains. Darren worked long hours as an HVAC tech, but he was a devoted dad when he was home, especially on weekends when they'd build birdhouses in the garage. Olivia and I were close. I knew her favorite songs, her childhood fears, the exact way she liked her sandwiches cut. She made me handmade birthday cards every year without fail. We even had matching robes for our weekend spa days, her idea. I never had a single reason to doubt that she was mine. 12 years of memories. First steps, first words, sleepless nights with fevers, proud moments at school recitals. They were all hers. Ours. There was nothing missing. No sign. No gap. So when the truth started to unravel, it didn't just shake me. It broke something I didn't know could break. Before I continue, I just want to pause for a second and ask you something. If you were in my shoes, raising a child for 12 years, only to find out she might not be yours, what would you do? Would you chase the truth, no matter how painful it might be? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. And if stories like this keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because what happens next will shake everything. Now, let's get back to it. It all began with a school science project. Olivia came home excited, holding a flyer for a free DNA testing kit offered through a local genetic study for kids. They said we can trace where our ancestors came from. Isn't that cool? I smiled. Sure, why not? We did it together, spit in a tube, sealed the kits, mailed them out. I thought nothing of it. 3 weeks later, Olivia handed me her results, her brow furrowed. This says I'm 40% Scandinavian. That's not right, is it? I froze. Darren and I are both African American. Our families trace back generations in Georgia and the Carolinas. There was no Scandinavian ancestry anywhere. I took the paper from her. My hands went cold. I logged into the results portal myself and double-checked everything. It wasn't just the ancestry report. The parental DNA matches section was empty. It said, "No immediate parent-child matches found." I stared at the screen, convinced it was an error. A glitch. But the next day, I ordered a private mother-daughter DNA test, just to quiet the voice in my head. I didn't tell Darren. I didn't tell Olivia. When the results came back, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Then I read the words that knocked the air out of my lungs. Probability of maternity, 0%. I felt the room spin. My hands shook. My baby, my daughter, wasn't biologically mine? 12 years of love, memories, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and now this? Everything I knew, everything I believed, was suddenly up for question. What would you even do if a DNA test told you your child wasn't yours? Would you ignore it? Would you tell them? Would you want to know the truth, no matter what it costs? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how others would handle this. And if you're still with me, thank you. Stories like this are never easy to tell. But it gets even more complicated from here. So make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because what happened next changed everything. For days, I didn't say a word to anyone. I walked around like a ghost, doing laundry, making dinner, answering Olivia's questions with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. But inside, I was unraveling. I'd stare at her while she watched TV or braided her hair, searching for something familiar in her face, something I had somehow missed for 12 years. But all I could see now were the things that didn't quite fit. The straightness of her nose. The cool undertone of her skin. Her long fingers, so unlike mine or Darren's. I couldn't stop myself. I went back to the hospital, St. Agnes Medical Center, where I'd given birth. Or so I thought. I requested Olivia's birth records. The receptionist looked confused. "You're not listed as the biological mother," she said. "It says here the child was transferred in from another ward, a temporary switch due to NICU overflow." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, transferred?" She shrugged, flipping through the file. "It happens sometimes. Babies get moved between units, especially if they're in observation. But there's usually a chain of custody." She paused. "This one looks incomplete." I left the hospital shaking. I went straight to Darren, showed him the results, told him everything. He didn't believe it at first, thought it was a scam. But when we ran his test too, the results were the same. We were not Olivia's biological parents. The only logical explanation was a hospital mix-up. I hired a private investigator, even though it felt surreal. Like something that only happened in documentaries. But a week later, she called. "There's another family," she said. "Their daughter was born at St. Agnes the same night as Olivia, and she's also showing signs of a mismatch." My throat tightened. Do they know? No. But the resemblance is striking. She sent me a photo. I dropped my phone. The girl in the picture looked exactly like me when I was 12. Same thick eyebrows. Same tilted smile. Even the same gap in her front teeth I had before braces. That was the moment I knew. Olivia was not my biological daughter. And somewhere out there, my real daughter had been living a life that was never meant to be hers. I thought I was prepared. I'd studied the photo 100 times. Rehearsed what I'd say. Imagined every possible outcome. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment I saw her in person. Her name was Layla. We agreed to meet at a small community center near their neighborhood. Neutral ground. Her parents, Marcia and Paul, were already seated when Darren and I walked in. They stood when they saw us, eyes wide with nerves and something else I recognized instantly. Grief. And then I saw her. Layla was sitting in the corner, sketching something in a notebook, her headphones in. Just like Olivia would. She looked up, and our eyes met. Everything stopped. My breath caught in my throat. It was like looking into a mirror from the past. Her posture, her mouth, even the way she furrowed her brows, it was me. She looked between us, confused. Then Marcia gently placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered something. Layla's eyes darted back to me. I smiled through the sting of tears. "Hi. I'm Alana." She nodded slowly. Hi. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She just stared. It was too much to take in, for all of us. We sat across from each other, awkward at first. The parents talked. Papers were exchanged. The investigator explained what had happened. The hospital rep, who had been dragged into this quietly, offered a hollow apology and talked about legal options. But I barely heard a word. All I could focus on was her. My daughter. My actual, biological daughter. And the deep, unbearable guilt creeping in. Because while Layla had grown up in a stable, loving home, I couldn't stop thinking about Olivia. The girl I'd kissed goodnight for 12 years. The one I raised, protected, celebrated. And now, I was caught in the middle of two truths, two daughters, each of them mine in a different way. And no matter what I chose, someone was going to be hurt. Before I share what happened next, I want to ask you something real. If you discovered your child wasn't biologically yours, but you had raised them, loved them, and watched them grow for 12 years, could you walk away? Or would you fight to keep that bond, no matter what the DNA said? Let me know in the comments. There's no easy answer, and I still ask myself that question every single day. And if this story has pulled you in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss the next chapter. Because what came after was even harder. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and impossible decisions. There were no guidebooks for this, no way to explain to a child that the woman who gave birth to her isn't the one who raised her. Or that somewhere out there, another girl holds a piece of the life that was meant for her. We told Olivia the truth the following weekend. She sat in stunned silence as we explained everything. The DNA tests. The hospital mistake. The girl in the photo. I expected tears. Maybe anger. But she just asked one question. So, am I not your daughter anymore? My heart shattered. I pulled her into my arms, holding her like I had the night she was born. You will always be my daughter, I whispered. No test can change that. But things weren't the same. She became quieter. More distant. I could see the questions building behind her eyes. Who am I, really? Do I belong here? And Layla, she was cautious. Polite. Curious, but guarded. We started slow, occasional visits, casual outings, conversations that were both comforting and awkward. There were glimmers of connection, the way she laughed at my jokes, her fascination with old family recipes, the ease with which she slid into our rhythm. But she also had another life, another mother who had loved her deeply, and wasn't ready to let go. None of us were. Darren struggled in his own way. He loved Olivia as fiercely as I did, but I could see the weight of the truth on his shoulders. It was like mourning a child who was still very much alive, and loving one who wasn't ours by blood, but still ours in every way that mattered. No court battle. No forced custody switch. Instead, we tried to build something fragile and real, a bridge between two families, two girls, and a future none of us ever expected. But behind every smile, every brave face, was pain. And the knowledge that we'd never truly be the same again. It's been a year since the truth came out. No, it hasn't been easy. There are still awkward silences, hard questions, and days when guilt creeps in without warning. But slowly, so slowly, we're healing. Olivia still lives with us. She's my daughter, in every way that matters. We've gone to therapy together. Talked. Cried. Laughed again. She even met Layla, and to my surprise, they clicked in a quiet, curious way. Almost like two branches of the same tree, finally meeting. Layla and I are still building something. Not to replace the years we lost, but to honor them in our own way. Sometimes she calls just to talk. Sometimes we cook together. She's still figuring out where I fit in her life. And I'm okay with that. What I've learned through all of this is simple: love isn't always born in a hospital. Sometimes, it's built in scraped knees, bedtime stories, and showing up, day after day, year after year. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Would you want to know the truth, if it meant your whole world could change? And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and stick around. There's always more to uncover.